All right, welcome back to Old Testament Survey, everybody. In this video, we want to talk just a little bit more about the Song of Solomon, and especially how the message of this book on love and sexuality relates to our culture. In the previous video, you found out that that's exactly what this book is about. It's not primarily a typology or an allegory, but this book is about love and sexuality. These are love poems. And if you read through the book, it gets pretty graphic. It's a man and a woman in an intimate relationship, and they desire each other, and they long to be with each other. And a lot of people have wondered, what's this book even doing in the Bible? Well, God wants the human beings to be really clear on this topic of love and sex, that sex is actually a gift from God. It's God's invention that he gives to the human beings. And God gives it to human beings so that it will be expressed by one man and one woman within the context of a covenant marriage. We said that these wisdom books in the Old Testament sort of engage other worldviews. This is certainly a worldview issue because the ancient Near East totally perverted this gift of love and sex from God. And obviously, as you know, our contemporary culture does the same thing. It's perverted almost beyond recognition. And certainly, this is a message that we need to proclaim in and through the church and to our culture. So this is certainly a worldview discussion. This book also contributes to the mission of God, God's redemptive mission. With all of the garden language and imagery in this book, Song of Solomon echoes Genesis 1 and 2 and the relationship there between the one man and the one woman and the perfect love that they experience for each other and for God. And so this book holds out a hope and an anticipation that we can recapture that intimacy and relationship. And it reminds us that there's a love that we long for that's greater than anything we've ever experienced. And, of course, that's the love that God has for us and that we can have for God. So let's talk about some of the love lessons from this book of Song of Solomon as it relates to our culture. These 4 lessons, I think, present God's design and structure and worldview, if you will, for sexuality expressed within the context of marriage. So the 4 lessons, as you see there, are love is mutual, love is exclusive, love is total, and love is beautiful. Let's start with the first one. Love is mutual. In this book, there's one man and one woman who engage in a conversation together, and that's God's intention for marriage. That marriage is one man plus one woman for one lifetime. If you read through the book Song of Songs, you notice that this man and woman have a conversation back and forth, and it gets kind of playful at times. And each one of them contributes equally to the marriage and relationship. That's what it means that love is mutual. It's interesting that the first speaker in this book is actually the woman. And in fact, she does most of the talking in this book, although the man obviously responds to her. That would be highly unusual in that ancient Near Eastern culture because women weren't valued, they didn't contribute to the marriage whatsoever. And so I think there's a very significant message that comes through this book, that in the context of marriage and a love relationship, love is mutual. The man and the woman contribute equally to the relationship. So just a warning, I'm going to go through some of the texts that demonstrate these lessons in the book, and obviously this is for mature audiences. In the Jewish tradition, the rabbis said that you had to be 30 years old in order to read this book, just because of its graphic nature and its mature subject matter. But I think you can all handle it, so here we go. So love is mutual. They talk back and forth and invite one another into the relationship. Here's the very first verse of the book. The woman speaks first. She says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. This isn't the book of Leviticus anymore, is it? And so she's very sort of aggressive and forward, and she issues the first invitation to the man. Here she speaks again in chapter 2. She says, my lover is mine, I am his. He browses among the lilies. These are metaphors, everybody. Then they get pretty graphic. She says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee, turn my lover, be like a gazelle or like a young stag on the rugged hills. And I don't think I have to explain that to you. She's inviting him into a very intimate relationship. Here the woman describes her man physically, and she's very attracted to him. She describes his head and his eyes and his cheeks, his arms, his legs, his mouth, and she expresses a physical attractiveness for her man. Here in chapter 3, the woman dreams about her lover and she longs for him. She wants to seek him, and she goes out here in the middle of the night to find him. So you can see that this woman has desire for her man. She loves him, and she wants to be with him. So let's look at the man's response to her and what he says. Here in chapter 2, well, it begins with a woman, first of all. She says, I'm a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. Those are very common flowers in Israel. So what she's saying about herself is, I'm kind of common, I'm not very pretty. And he responds to her by saying, like a lily among thorns is my darling among the maidens. So the man's response to her is, well, you may think you're common and not pretty, but to me, you're beautiful. To me, you stand out among all women. And then maybe in the most famous part of this book, the man physically describes her eyes, her hair, her teeth, lips, mouth, temple, and he describes how much he loves her and how beautiful he finds her. Now remember, these are metaphors. We're not supposed to take them literally. If we took them literally, it wouldn't look very, very attractive. It would look something like that. Maybe something like this. Or there's another sort of cartoon depiction if you took these things literally. They're metaphors meant to express physical attraction. So the second lesson in the book about love and sexuality is that love is exclusive. That is, as we said, it's meant for one man, one woman within the context of a covenant marriage. It's exclusive. Only two are involved. No one else is invited into this personal, private relationship. And here we can see some of the verses that support this lesson. In chapter 4, the man praises her virginity. She's a locked garden. She's a spring enclosed. Here he says in chapter 4, your neck is like the Tower of David. That is, you're inaccessible. And again, expressing her virginity and that she has saved himself for him. Here in chapter 8, we see the community involved in protecting her. These are her brothers speaking. He says, we have a young sister. What shall we do for our sister? If she's a wall, we'll build towers of silver on her. That is, if she doesn't think she's very pretty and she's not very, sort of personable, we'll help her meet somebody. On the other hand, if she's a door, that is, if she's a little bit too aggressive before marriage, we'll enclose her with panels of cedar. So this is her brothers protecting her and keeping her for her future husband. Obviously, this love being exclusive in our culture is not very valued within the context of marriage. And you all know maybe the story of Tiger Woods and many, many other people. The movies and television shows sort of glorify sex outside of marriage. All right, a third lesson that we discover from this book is that love is total. That is, it's not just physical. It's not just something that, that happens biologically, but this love relationship is total. on every level. It involves emotions, it involves mental activity, it involves certainly spiritual nature, but love is intended to be a total coming together and in oneness of every aspect of our being. Here, the demonstration of that from chapter 5. She says, "This is my lover, this is my friend." So they're not just physical lovers, but they're friends, they're partners. They have the same dreams and aspirations for the future, and they are united physically, spiritually, emotionally, and obviously physically too. But love is total. This is an old movie from 1993, probably from the time before you were born, but Woody Harrelson, Demi Moore, and Robert Redford are in this movie, Indecent Proposal, and it's about a billionaire who offers this couple $1 million for one night with the wife. And the whole movie is about whether she'll do it or not do it. Well, spoiler alert, she does it. And she says, "I'm going to give him my body, but not my soul." Well, I have news for you. They're not detachable. And if you give somebody your body, you are connected in every way, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. And that's why God reserved sexual love for a marriage commitment. And then finally, the fourth lesson is that love is beautiful. It's a beautiful gift from God, but beauty isn't defined outwardly or physically like our culture does. You know, our culture says you have to be young and pretty and thin and athletic if you want to be attractive. This book says that beauty is defined inwardly, and especially beauty is defined by the spiritual character that the other person has. The thing that the man and the woman are most attracted to in each other is the spiritual component of who they are. That is, their love for God and for living God's kind of life. Here in chapter 2, they say to each other, "You are my darling, you are my beautiful one." In Proverbs 3, this isn't from the book of Songs, but it still sort of defines what beautiful love is. And here the author says, "Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting." Yeah, beauty certainly is fleeting in our culture. Everybody ages and the beauty goes. But a woman or a person who fears the Lord is to be praised. The beauty that God desires that we see in each other is the spiritual beauty of our love for God and living his life. I think one of the most important aspects of a marriage and a relationship is that spiritual dimension. The spiritual dimension of a marriage will make or break it. If you have it, your marriage will succeed. If you don't have a spiritual aspect to your marriage, it will likely fail at some point along the way. Here's a quote from Andrew Greeley, where he talks about the importance of the spiritual component of a relationship. He says, "The happiest couples are those who pray together. Couples who frequently pray together are twice as likely as those who pray less often to describe their marriages as being highly romantic. They also report considerable higher sexual satisfaction and more ecstasy." And that's something that our culture doesn't know anything about. They have no idea. Our culture talks about technique and how to and so on. But really, the thing that adds to a sexual relationship within marriage is the spiritual component. And here, this author, Andrew Greeley, has actually researched this and says that prayer can actually add to a person's a marriage and a relationship between a man and a woman. If you want to read more about this, I would highly recommend this book by Todd Wilson called Mere Sexuality. This is a wonderful little book where he just gives sort of the basic, sort of foundational message and structure of God's wonderful gift of sexuality given to human beings. What is it? How is it supposed to be expressed? And what's God's purpose for sex? for the human beings. So I would highly recommend this book if you want to read more on this. So that's what the book of Song of Solomon's about. A great little book, a very important message for our culture as it relates to love and sexuality.